You're listening to Season 2 of Dangerous Drag Queens and Other Deviants, a production of Virtual Arts.
Hi, my name is Larry.
I'm Christy.
And I'm Gret. Welcome to another episode of Dangerous Drag Queens and Other Deviants.
Today we're welcoming Chip Miller, Associate Artistic Director of Portland Center Stage at the Armory. Take it away.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm so happy to have as our guest today Chip Miller from the Portland Center Stage in Oregon. Can you tell us a little bit about the Portland Center Stage, Chip?
Yeah, of course. And it's so great to be here. Thanks for having me. Portland Center Stage is the largest LORT theater in Portland, Oregon, because Portland, Oregon has two LORT theaters. We are located in an old Armory building, so that's why we are Portland Center Stage at the Armory. It's a historic building. It's a LEED certified building. Portland Center Stage moved in 2006, so we're coming up on 20 years in the building. It's a very cool historic building. I know the first time I walked into the theater from the outside, I was like, what is this castle in the middle of a city? And then you walk in and it's just, I think this one of the most gorgeous lobbies in the American theater, beautiful lighting, open concept. It feels alive. And you feel the history of the space. It's fun to walk around the building and see they have like old construction drawings. And so you can see before it was refabbed to be a theater, like, oh, this was just a turret. And it was so deep. I know at one point there was amateur wrestling happened in the building. The building itself has a very storied history, but the theater has been there for about 20 years.
It really is a gorgeous building in a very beautiful part of Portland because it's kind of right before you get into the Pearl. But this particular area, I think, is really gorgeous. I was shocked when I first went into that theater because it's so big.
It's huge, yes. But it feels small sometimes. It feels intimate. I think that's what I like about that space is that it is a huge space. The stage is very deep, but that when you're on stage or when you're in the house, you feel like you have a very direct line between audience and performer in a way that it still feels intimate, even though there's 600 seats.
And then downstairs, if you continue down one more flight, there's also where I've seen a couple of your shows, Chip, there's also a wonderful black box space.
Yes, the Ellen By studio, which I love working in that studio. It's such a beautiful, flexible space with a weird ceiling. I've done things in stage, like I know you saw Hedwig and the Angry Inch, and we did it in stage with on-stage seating. I did a production with Artist Repertory Theater in the space it was the world premiere of American Fast by Kareem Fahmy, which is a play about basketball and the women's NCAA tournament. So we staged it in alley to sort of simulate a basketball court. And so that was really fun. And then last year we did Loy Webb's The Light in there. Beautiful, searing play set in a couple's living room. And so we did it in the round so that there was no escape and so that we became the flies on the wall of their apartment. And so I love that space. You can do so many different things in it and how you tell the story, form and content get to meet.
Yes. Yes, I love that about that space. And every time I've been there to see a play, of course, it's been dramatically different. That is where I saw Hedwig and the actor who you had play Hedwig.
DJ Curtis.
Extraordinary.
Stunning and singular.
Yeah, they are a shocking creature beyond description. Very, very enthralling.
I think that they are just a singular performer and a singular human, and that there is a depth of feeling that lives inside of DJ that comes out in every way they move through the world, but when you hear them sing, it is an otherworldly experience. The range, the emotion, the control, and I think what I love about DJ as a performer and what I see when I see their work is that it's always with the point of reaching people. They know that it's not just I'm making noise into the world, it's I'm making this sound with the intention that it's going to connect to you and make you feel something and hopefully send that energy back so it becomes the flow. I feel like DJ creates flow with people and can create flow with a large group of people at once.
I really believe that since you became part of the organization there, not that it was not diverse before, because the Portland Center Stage has always been a very diverse company, but I really feel that since you have been there, there has kind of been an embrace of different people, different plays. There's just a different feeling. I feel like you brought something really very Portland from somebody from Kansas City. You brought something very Portland to Portland.
That's very kind of you to say. And I think the gift is that Portland Center Stage is located in Portland and does have a history of doing great work with great artists. And I think that for me, so much of the role of the regional theater is to bolster the economy and the ecosystem of the theater industry in the town that it's in. I feel very lucky to be on the team with Marissa Wolf as our artistic director and Camila Bush as our literary manager in terms of like the on-stage curation. And in my role as casting director, I think that I always go into a play in a casting process wanting to think, what can a character contain? That I think that every character has such a wide range of how it could be. I love like when you go and see a production of Hamlet, there you could bring in 1,000 people to be Hamlet, and they can look all kinds of ways. They can have so many different lived experiences, and their Hamlet is going to be different. And it just becomes, well, what story are you telling? But I think that so often, at least the way I was taught to do casting was like, narrow it down as much as possible. So we're seeing like, here's the types. And I think for me, it's what is the most expansive version? The types exist for a reason. Like they are not unuseful, but I'm always interested in how can we break beyond the type? What is our base understanding of what the need for the character is? I always use the South Pacific example of the plot hinges on Nellie Forbush confronting her own internalized racism. So Nellie Forbush, it does feel important for that character to be white.
Right.
That's not true of most characters in the American canon. It's just like how we've assumed based on what that original production did, how it's historically been cast, the time in which it exists. And I think that part of, for me, is I also exist in a time where it is easier to make bolder, more diverse choices in casting because the world around me, the industry around me, is also changing at that rate.
Right.
That it is that we are excited as audience members, as practitioners, as people who work and live around the theater about saying, what is a new idea? Who are new people to see on stage? Where have we historically erased stories or whitewashed stories or been very narrow-minded in how we're casting or creating worlds or curating seasons? And so I think getting to live inside of a landscape that is celebrating difference is an exciting time to be inside of. And I think that for me, it's always about how are we bolstering that local group. And so there are so many wonderful artists in Portland who are making work. And I love the opportunity we have to showcase and highlight those Portland artists.
Yes, and you can feel it. I remember that we went to see a Christmas show, and you have a fantastic actor that you've used several times at that theater who's a little person.
Oh, Lord Madika, who is a wonderful performer.
She's astounding. Really, it's amazing to see her.
Yeah, she's an incredible performer. I love seeing her on stage. Just like a Portland favorite, an OSF favorite, just a wonderful human.
Seeing her perform and seeing her come on stage, you know, because of how we've been programmed as people, you kind of go, wow, that's odd. And she dispels that in seconds. I really think that that's one of the things that you all do at Portland Stage is that you give us as theater goers here this wide palette of the most, as you're saying, as the most amazing performers that you can see that nobody thought, well, okay, we don't want her because she looks odd. You know, they're like, oh, she's a great actress, so bring her in.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, storytelling is a visual medium, yes. Theatrical storytelling is a visual medium. And so you can't control what the audience's preconceived notions of anything is. An audience is going to bring whatever an audience brings. For me, it's what story are you telling and who are the people you want to tell it with? And that the story you're telling is informed by who you're working with, but that doesn't mean it has to look a certain way. It has to look the way that you, the collective, you, the director, you, the team that's producing it, wants it to look and wants it to feel. And so what story are you telling, and who are the people that best tell that story? And I think at the end of the day, people being in stories across difference is far more interesting than having something that's commodified. And at the end of the day, usually the person who is the best fit for the role, as part of the collective of that project, is going to be the person who gets it, which is not necessarily the person who you think of as the best fit. Right. I always say a lot of times people are like, I don't think that person should have been cast, but you don't see the audition. Casting is such a strange thing because very few people get to see the entire process of it. That usually by the time you come to making a decision on a play, there are maybe 4 people who have seen every audition. It's a lot of putting together a puzzle and making a perfect team. And you're trying to say, like, how am I balancing these things? How are these 2 people together? But also confronting, like, what are things that we've been taught about on stage image of, like, the woman can't be taller than the man is such a
right.
old trope that then gets tied up into, like, well, it tells this story, it tells this story, or it tells this stories. And sometimes it's like, no, she's just taller than him. There are women in the world who are taller than their male partners. What's more interesting is what is their chemistry together? What is the dynamic that they bring? And it's not to say that the image of them together is not part of that dynamic storytelling, that we are informed of, oh, we do have opinions on what a couple where the woman is taller than the man is in our society. Like, we have preconceived notions about that. So it does tell some story, but it doesn't negate a woman from being a romantic lead because she's taller than the male lead.
Right, absolutely.
It just means, oh, we're going to challenge your idea of what this dynamic can be. And that feels like a very small potatoes thing. And also for some people, that feels like representation. And I think a thing becomes normalized by seeing it.
Yes. Chip, I also wanted just to address with you, I know that you do some other things within that space, and I know that you do some drag events in that space, right?
We have done drag events. We have fairly robust community programs, which is our education and community programs department. And because we have such a cool space, we try to utilize it in as many ways as possible to connect with community. So we do both classes for young people and classes for adults throughout the year. And we also have these community programs. This past weekend, we had a holiday bazaar of local vendors before a performance of Little Women. And so for 4 hours on Sunday, you can come and meet with vendors, buy things, get your Christmas gifts early. And we had live music throughout that. We've done drag shows. We've done musical Mondays. We've done talks with different community organizations. We've done toy drives and food drives. It manifests in a different way on every show. But it always wants to be tied to, like, where in time are we and what is the play doing? But also thinking of, we've talked a lot about how multidisciplinary conversation in the arts feels very important these days. I'm about to do a production of Lizard Boy where the actors are all actor-musician, and thinking about the ways in which our art forms inform each other and how do we lean into what we can learn, and what is that overlap of audience of, there might be people who, I mean, theater is still considered for the bourgeois, and that there is this barrier of access to the theater. And part of that is reality, that there are many barriers to access for people to the theater. And part of that is perception of what story has been told about who gets to go to the theater, who belongs in the theater, who can feel safe in the theater. And I think that perception sometimes stops people from even allowing themselves to say, like, oh, that sounds interesting, but the theater's not for me, so I'm not going to go see that show. And so I think sometimes being able to do something like, hey, there's this play going on, but there's going to be a drag brunch before the play. Going to that drag brunch might be the thing that says, oh, that's for me. That's something I'm familiar with. I can go do that. Now I've come to the building. Now I know that this is a safe space. I know it's cool. I had a good time. I want to come back. We have to understand that to get people to the space sometimes takes more than saying, come see this play.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Well, you know, Liza and Liberace,
Yes.
which was
Yes.
one of our Christmas favorites.
We did Liza Liberace for 2 years, and it's a great show. And David Saffer and Jillian Snow, who do Liberace and Liza, they do Liberace and Liza all over. Just a delightful, irreverent, joyful time.
Well, it's a wonderful show because you want it to be a drag show in a certain way because it's like Liza Minnelli and Liberace, but it isn't.
I think they're both in high drag. I think Liberace and Liza in their lives are drag. And I think that the loving tributes that Jillian and David do are beautiful drag performances.
Yes, I guess you're right. It's really amazing. But the audiences in Portland are much like Portland, and that is that they're predominantly white. And I find them to be an unbelievably accepting audience of anything, anything I go to see. The Portland audience really stays and they really indulge themselves in the diversity of the performances that are at that theater. And I think it's lovely.
Well, I think that is tied to why I'm so interested in the Portland community of artists, is that there is something to going and having a relationship to the person on stage. And I'm not like talking parasocial, like, ooh, but in the way of the gift of having that. I think we all know that there is the myth that like all great artists live in New York or LA, and you get old enough to understand that the myth is a lie. And the reality is that every city has incredible artists who have made a choice different than I want to move to New York or LA or London or wherever it is. I've chosen this city to make my art and to make my life. And that I think for me, the joy of getting to live in multiple cities and have artistic life in those cities is to get to meet the artists of those cities, to see the way in which those cities inform them and they inform that city, and to get to have a long-term relationship to their work. There are so many artists in the city who I'm thrilled that I get to see 2, 3, 4, 12 projects of theirs in a year, and to get to see how over time, like, oh, what is their work doing to respond to this moment in time? I'm less interested in like, oh, here's the direct correlation of the kind of performance they're giving now to what's going on in the mayoral race. But I think that you live in a city for long enough, you feel the ebbs and flows of the vibe of the city and what people are feeling, and you see how an artist is able to tap into that feeling. And it's not just actors or directors, it's painters, it's musicians, it's artisans, it's so many different kinds of artists that you get to have a relationship to, going to galleries, going to dance pieces, going to be in the world. Because at the end of the day, theater is a medium that is so multidisciplinary.
What's the difference between here and I think that the other place that you spent a lot of time was Kansas City? So do the same kind of plays here, but just in a different style? What do you feel the kind of difference is? Because Kansas City has a very progressive and wonderful theater scene.
Yeah, I think that it's more like, what are sensibilities? And I think that so much of it comes down to who lives there. In terms of like, who are the artists you're working with there? They're being informed by a different thing. They're being informed by a different politic. They're being informed by a different way of life. I think the thing about Portland is, I think there is a different breadth of work. I think that audiences are a little more willing to see that weird avant-garde experimental theater practice in more work here. And I think getting to be in a city for a long time, you start to learn, oh, what is that dialogue with the audience? Oh, the audience really responded to this. So I can't make this project again, but how can I make something not necessarily that is the same as this, but something that feels like the continuity of that conversation?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I really feel that from your work, and I feel that from the work that I see at Portland Center Stage. It's really very fluid and it's very nice to see. And by the way, I think that this subject that you're talking about, which is that theater is informed by the people who live in that city, we wouldn't really know that without places like regional theaters.
Yes.
Because you don't learn that from some of our great musicals that come through into our big auditoriums. We just don't learn that from them. But in these smaller spaces, you do learn that. I think it's fascinating to see it because I've had the pleasure of directing in many American cities and understanding that audiences in different cities want a different feel. And
Yep.
I don't think that people always get that. They kind of just like, we want to go in and just do the play. But what you're talking about really is understanding not just the actors and the play, but the audience as well, which is just so great.
I think it's the vital thing is that we're not making the art for the sake of making the art. When you're making theater, like you can make theater in a vacuum all you want, but it's not really theater until there's an audience. And so it's that thing of like, you can do a perfect run of a play in a rehearsal, but if there's no audience, that rhythm is interrupted. And so I believe that you always have to think about audience. That doesn't mean you have to always think I'm doing this to please the audience, but you do have to think of like, I do need the audience to feel something. I do need the audience to glean a piece of information. I do need an audience to give me the response that helps me get to the next thing.
I don't think it's important to always please the audience in
Oh no.
the way that we think that we please them, because if we did, we wouldn't stretch any of those boundaries of the theater at all.
Well, we talk so much about like who's a likable character and the ways in which needing to like someone or needing to agree with their decisions. It's like, no, sometimes we're doing plays where we're watching people we disagree with or don't like do things that we don't agree with or don't like. And that is not an endorsement of the behavior or the acts. It is just a investigation of a story.
Yes, were that an endorsement, our daily lives would be destroyed because we're surrounded by people whose opinions we don't like. And, here in Portland, we just seem to listen to them and move on. So, or just don't talk to them. I'm so happy for you and for Portland Center Stage to be able to have the kind of work that you do. And I don't know a lot of other regional theaters because I've lived in Manhattan and then we lived in Hawaii. But being here and now 6 years into living here, seeing how all of the different theater that exists across the city is really wonderful.
I can't see everything because there's so much that's going on. I am a person who I think I am going to the theater multiple times a week and still can't quite see everything because around the city there are so many different locations, there are so many different things that are popping up.
I think 2 years ago, didn't you direct 3 plays in one season?
Last year I did 4 plays in one season.
Right. Okay. Right. I'm glad you're still sane because I was thinking about you.
I think for me, it's a thing of planning a season is always a puzzle. And I think when you're planning it, you have like, what are plays that the company wants to do? What are dream projects? And then you try to figure out what fits. And so last year just happened to be a year where a couple of my dream projects fit inside of what our season needed. And this season I said, let me take a step back. But I think it's all about ebb and flow. But for me, I love being in rehearsal because I'm more in the like figuring out the story.
I think that's great. And you also work with other companies around the country where you do a production and then what do they then do that same production?
I think the American theater right now is living inside of co-productions, which is 2 or multiple theaters saying, we're committing to doing the same production of a play in multiple cities. And that it becomes, I think, a benefit to everyone. One, it's those artists get to have their work seen in multiple cities. Usually with actors, it allows them to qualify for health insurance weeks because the contract is longer, so it gets them more weeks for their health insurance. And it's a cost savings in that you share sets and costumes, you share the expenses of them. If you rehearse a play once, you don't have to rehearse it again in another city, so it shrinks that rehearsal process. So there are little savings here and there that make it really effective. And also for that second, third, fourth, however many cities are in the co-pro, you then have collateral material for marketing. I think one of the things that's so hard about regional theater is that you are selling the idea of a production of a play for months and months. And then that play, from the first rehearsal to the final performance, is usually no longer than 10 weeks. And so you get your collateral images of production photos and trailers with 5 weeks left to use them. And I think that as a freelance artist who is also a producer, it's so useful to go be produced by someone else because it informs my work as a producer when I'm producing someone else's art.
Sure, sure. And I think that the audiences get to see other actors that they don't typically get to see.
Yes.
So it's really a win-win. But anyway, thank you so much for spending this time with us.
Thank you. It's such a joy.
And happy holidays to you.
Yeah.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
But
Have
a
a
great rest of
your
spectacular
day.
time. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
You too. Bye.
He's so great.
Yeah.
Oh, fabulous.
Wonderful. And it's funny because the three of us, have all lived in various cities and have had experiences with it. So I think we especially can relate to it, having seen in a number
Absolutely.
of different cities what it's like.
Marissa, who is the artistic director, is really great. She kind of took a step back as well this year. And I think some of it had to do with the fact that they needed to fundraise because they lost almost all of their
Oh
funding.
my gosh. Yeah.
Mhm.
And
So many people did this year.
yeah, but Portland responded by helping raise $1 million in like 4 weeks.
Wow.
Amazing.
Yeah, because
Well-
they have a lot of big corporations here that support them. So they were able
Yeah.
to get that money.
And it was so interesting to hear him talking about what I think, I mean, if all of the regional theaters could think this way, you know, the co-pro idea and the idea that you are investing in the community and the community is investing in you, and that's sort of a mutually beneficial relationship rather than we're putting on some shows, we need funding to put on some shows, and then you're going to have a fun time seeing the show. It's way deeper than that, and it feels so forward looking. I hate looking back at pandemic now. You know, none of us want to look back there, but we are still crawling out of that hole. And this is the way to do it. I mean, my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's almost the thing that makes the finances of theater make sense. It's
Absolutely.
like, why isn't this the way? When I worked at Arena, when they did Sweat, which I think is Lynn Nottage, and it was a co-pro with somebody in Portland, and I don't know if it was Portland Center. It's over 10 years ago. But
Probably.
I remember that was the first time I had heard that kind of model set up, and it's just so smart.
Yeah. And also the utilization of the space as not just the theater, you know, to make it more familiar. The community then takes more ownership in that way. You know, if they're not just in that space as an audience member only, which has its value, of course, huge value, but to have them come in for, like he was saying, a Christmas fair, you know, I'm going to take my kids in and come buy some
Yeah,
Christmas
they do
presents.
it. They do it. Yeah.
I mean, that's spectacular. You naturally get more invested when things like that are offered.
You do, absolutely. So I think that for the director, the stage manager, all those people who put in that valuable time to get that piece to be a production that is viable, it's something that people often don't account for, is what that energy is. They think about the finances, but sometimes I think that artistic energy in smaller communities is wasted because they don't share.
This is our last episode for 2025. So
Woohoo!
happy holidays, everybody. And we'll see you next year.
Yes. Happy holidays. Happy New Year. Let's hope next year is better than this one. No.
Onward to 2026. It's got to be
Onward.
better.
2028.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Dangerous Drag Queens and Other Deviants. To find out more, follow and like us on all our socials. And if you like what you hear, please be sure to share with a friend. That's all for now. Keep living dangerously and on your own terms.